let's go over to camera 2. Here we go. All right, so welcome everybody. Thank you for coming out. I really appreciate it. So simple details, right? Little itty bitty things that anybody can take care of, that anybody can accomplish, even beginners, even novices. These are types of things with a little bit of plastic, maybe some detail parts, and the proper tools. You guys can absolutely accomplish. And it'll make your model look that much more custom, and that much more, kind of unique to its own, right? It'll set it apart from every other model of its kind, right? We've got the airdrop over here today. Live streamed that 100 plus hours of in progress and work in progress footage there for that. So I'm going to show you a lot of the stuff that I did for that today, and you're going to get a lot of information. So, all right. So with that being started, let's talk about tools. All right. Biggest thing that obviously you're going to need is that right here, your standard hobby knife, right? Now, these come in different sizes, different shapes, right? I prefer the Olfa brand, which is this. This has a much less angled blade on it. Be good if I was, where's my camera? Trying to find that. There it is. There's the camera angle. Sorry. This is much less angled than your standard X-Acto number 11 blade that we're all familiar with, right? The reason why I use this is because you get a lot more control with your knife skills and everything. I just like this so much better. A standard 11 blade, the tip can snap. You guys probably know this very, very easily. These Olfa brand blades and everything are really, really solid. Very, very high quality stuff. You can get these. I don't. Where'd Zach go? No. Anyway, I know he's trying to get them here at Galactic Toys, but if worst comes to worst, Amazon, Lowe's, places like that. So you can get this very knife on those places. So great hobby knife, the pillar of all hobbies, right? Now, with that, Olfa makes different style blades. This is the chisel blade, which is basically just a flat chisel, but to a razor sharp point. You'll be seeing a lot of this today because this is one of my favorite blades. I use this for cleanup and for evening out surfaces and things like that. Very, very good blade to have. Again, I think Zach's trying to get these, but Amazon will have these. Lowe's does not, unfortunately. So that's kind of a disappointment. Beyond that, a good set of nippers. I have 3 here today, right? I've got this kind of inexpensive, these are by Zuron, American company. You can get these on Amazon. These are kind of my sledgehammer, if you will. This is not for precision. This is for grunt work. This basically cuts through, your thicker, runners and thick plastic and stuff like that, and basically material removing nippers, right? So that's a good one to have. These are Tamiya 140s, 73 140. I've had these for years, right? These were my kind of first good nippers, if you will. They're good, but they're not the best, right? Now, these are our double-bladed nippers. There's also single-bladed. That's for, cutting and trimming sprues and stuff. This is more for general work, so keep that in mind. So these are good. I still use these if I don't want to, maybe something I need finer than this, but not necessarily super delicate, right? And then after that, the good old 73 74 123s. These, in terms of Tamiya's brand, are their top of the line. These are solid, double-bladed nippers, super sharp, and as you can see, very, very fine in terms of the jaw profile as well. So these I highly recommend if you're in the market for a double-bladed nipper. These are the Cadillac, if you will. So nippers are an essential tool. Beyond that, for this type of work, you know, a metal ruler will definitely come in handy. This is just a Zona brand L square. Again, you can get this on places like Amazon, things like that. Zach, Zona is definitely a good company to look into. Zona. They carry a bunch of cool tools and stuff. I use their L square here. Also, their pin vices are amazing, so highly recommended. As well, and if you guys watch the stream, you'll notice you'll know these very well. These are the Wave T squares. They come in two different flavors. They got the teeny tiny guy, and then they got the big boy. This is more for cutting precision plastic sheet. This is more for your detail work. This is the one tool, the one metal ruler that I use absolutely the most. This right here is worth its weight in gold. Solid right angle, has measurements up and down on both sides. Really, really good stuff. Also millimeter, which is super handy because trying to, you know, flip your ruler back and forth is a super pain, right? Let's see. Beyond that, a good set of tweezers is awesome. These, I'm still trying to find that camera angle. These are by a company named Eck Tools. You can find these in craft stores. These are for like sewing and stuff like that. These are like $6. They're super cheap, but these are the best tweezers I've ever used in my life. I've had these, I don't even know how long. I bought a second pair just in case they ever stop making these, just to be on the safe side, right? But these are reverse jaw. They're not super long. They're very, 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 very fine in terms of the jaws. I love these things. These are great. So you're going to see me use that a lot today. Also getting into some files and sanding blocks. For those of you at home, you've already seen this stuff. Sanding blocks, these, I actually got these with a book that I ordered one time. These are actually acrylic laser cut and then has double-sided tape on it. Now, these are fancy in terms of sanding blocks. You can make your own. If you know somebody with a laser cutter or a 3D printer or something like that, you can probably make a base for it. Double-sided tape, sanding paper from the hardware store, boom, you got yourself a really nice sanding block. Alternatively, MDF, medium density fiberboard, comes in many different thicknesses, 3/4 inch, 1/2 inch, and 1/4 inch, I think even 1/8 at this point too. You can cut that down, or you can have somebody cut that down for you. Again, double-sided tape, sandpaper, you got yourself a really, really solid sanding block. The main thing with sanding blocks I have to stress is their rigidity. You don't want this thing bending on you. That's the big thing. You want a nice flat surface. To go with those, little needle files like this. They usually come in sets. You have files, right? You carry files? Okay, so you can get files like this here. Alternatively, if you're watching at home, you can order through Galactic Toys and Hobbies. There you go. But these are great. These are not the diamond files with the diamond grit. I don't like those because they clog very, very easily with plastic. These are actual like files. They have teeth and everything ground into them, and this will remove material. But you can get a super, super clean edge and really nice work with these. So files, I think, are very, very helpful. Not necessarily a must, but extremely helpful. Next, we're going to kind of get into some tools and materials and things like that that are kind of nice to have. Let's put it that way, right? Let's talk about glue real quick first. Today, I'm going to be using super glue. You can use, you know, your Tamiya extra thin. You can use your Plastic Magic, all that good stuff. Zach has some Plastic Magic up front as well. Thank you for getting that in because that's good stuff. I'm going to tell you that right now. If you've not heard me talk about Plastic Magic, it's magic. It's literally magic because it glues styrene, it glues ABS, it glues acrylic, and then it glues all those together. You can mix and match and glue them all together. It's absolutely the best glue in the world for modeling. But alternatively today, just for speed and for demo use, I'm going to be using super glue. Now, I've actually just become a fan of the Bob Smith Industries, the BSI super glues. I actually just picked this up maybe a week or two ago at my local hobby shop, and this is good stuff, you guys. I'm not gonna lie. I've been a firm supporter of Loctite Ultra Liquid Control for many years. You can get this at Home Depot, super cheap. It's like $3 a bottle. I will usually buy this in the case and just have it on hand, right? But this stuff right here, I find is actually a little bit better than my beloved Loctite. I know for you guys at home, you're probably going to say blasphemy, right? But no, it's true. The reason why I like the Bob Smith is because you get roughly the same amount, um, if not more. Yeah, you actually get more in this for probably just maybe about $1 more. They also another good thing is you get this super fine application tip that comes in handy in so many ways, right? And you're going to see me use this a lot today with some of the things that we're going to adhere to plastic and stuff like that. So super glue is definitely one of your best friends when it comes to certain situations. You don't want to use it with, for seam filling and stuff like that or seam bonding because it is brittle, it will pop. So don't use it for that. Use your solvent-based glues for that. Your Plastic Magic, your Tamiya Extra Thin, stuff like that, right? That way the plastic kind of melds together like this, right? This is just adhesive, so they're just going to stick together, and then there's going to be a thin layer between the two. That's it. You for seaming, you want that melting action, right? Let's see what's next. You know what? I always am a great proponent of a good caliper. When you're getting into truly custom stuff and you're trying to get that symmetry on both sides of the mech, a good caliper to double check your ratios and your tolerances and things is extremely handy. This is by a company called Ubante or Ubante. I don't know how to pronounce it because my pronunciation on things is really bad. But very inexpensive. You don't need some machinist's caliper for doing what we do. This is good enough. I think this was like $15 on Amazon. It was super cheap. So, your Harbor Freights, your places like that, your Home Depots, those are going to be perfectly fine for what we do, trust me. Because we don't need super precise, measurements and stuff. So this will be perfect, and it's super handy because not only does it measure outside dimensions, it also measures inside dimensions on things as well. So very handy. And this one actually is kind of like a unique one because this one can convert from millimeters to inches and then also to fractions, which is kind of a unique deal. So that's why I kind of got this one just to be on the safe side. Um, let's see. Let's talk about chisels, right? So you've probably seen people do these amazing scribing jobs, right? And then also Dymo tape goes hand in hand with chisels. If you guys know people like my friend Josh Dara from Australia, who has won GBWC down there, amazing scribing work, just a master at his craft. He's a true artist when it comes to that. These are the types of things that we use, right? So everybody's familiar with scribing, right? And custom panel lines and everything, right? Cool. So these are the three that I use the most. 0.15, 0.30, and 0.50. Now, these are BMCs. There's two kind of equal brands. There's BMCs, which I'm invested in at this point, but there's also MadWorks. And for those of you guys here today, you're lucky enough to buy them actually here on the shelf because Zach is like an amazing store guy, and he stocks MadWorks here at the store. So if you guys are local or if you're interested in coming here to Galactic Toys, yes, you can buy MadWorks here, right? Um, so thank you for that. Appreciate that. He's also got some other cool stuff here too, like simp models, conversion kits, and things. So Galactic Toys and Hobbies. So yeah, so these are going to be my three main chisels. This is a good starter set if you want to venture into scribing and notches and kind of real customization at that point. Um, if you had to start with one, I'd start with the panel line, 0.15 for 1/100 and up. For 144, I'd probably scale that back to zero point 0.1. After that, like I said, 0.3 and 0.5 are going to be your for notches and things like that, because that's also important when it comes to panel line scribing. Those would be secondary, and then after that, sky's the limit. Whatever you feel like you need. 1 millimeter, 1.5, whatever. Now, to go hand in hand with that, with custom scribing and stuff like that, is our good friend Dymo tape or guide tape in some circles. Do you carry the MadWorks guide tape? Okay, so same thing, same principle. I just have a ton of Dymo tape at home. Again, I buy this by the case just because this stuff is getting harder and harder to find. Because the Dymo doesn't make the old school kind of hand crank embossing labelers like they do. They're all heat printed now, so the tape that they use is much thinner, which is garbage for trying to panel line scribe. So a lot of beginners, when they get into panel line scribing, they're looking for Dymo tape. They usually get the wrong thing. They usually get the super, the heat print stuff, and they're like, how does this work? Well, you got the wrong tape. So this is the stuff that you want. This is the embossing tape. This is thicker, and it's pretty rigid stuff. So this will give you a nice guide for your chisel to run down. Also, the MadWorks guide tape is theirs clear?
It is, yeah.
That's much better, actually. I actually want to. Do you have? Okay, cool. We can show that. So MadWorks makes a clear tape. This is obviously black. This comes in red and green and a ton of other different colors. Doesn't matter what color you use, to be honest with you. The clear tape now is actually better, and I've been wanting to try to get some of that. Mainly because since you can see through it, you can see where your line is going to match up. So if you draw your panel lines on the piece and everything. Thank you, buddy. Appreciate that. So here's the MadWorks stuff. You got 3 millimeter, or 3 millimeter. You got 4 millimeter, and then you got big old fat boy 5 millimeter. Do they?
Yeah.
They're crazy,
Yes.
man. They're crazy.
Yeah.
So yeah, so this is carving guide. They call it carving guide tape. And yeah, so this you can actually see where your tape is laying down. So if you draw the panel lines that you're going to mark actually on the part, if you sketch them out and everything, we'll talk about that here in a little bit. This is actually really good. Now, mind you, over the years of not having this, I've gotten pretty good with placing this down and knowing where my lines are going to meet up. So this is a safe alternative, but if you can, this is the stuff right here. There are also other companies that make it. HiQ. What's some other ones? I don't know. But anyway, MadWorks is great. You can pick it up here today. So thank you, bud. Appreciate that.
Online, so if anybody's looking for
And
it,
online.
yeah.
Order it online through Galactic Toys. So scribing, we're going to get into that a little bit here, a little bit later. So let's talk about materials, right? So this is what we're going to be using today. You all are going to get some strips of this to work with. This is plastic strip. This comes in a ton of different shapes and extrusions. I happen to really like Evergreen Scale Models products. They're an American company. You can order them right from their website. I know Zach is trying to get some more stock in here as well, so that's going to be fun. But this stuff I use every single day when I'm building. Comes in strips, comes in tubes and half round and rods and square tubes, I-beams, all sorts of different shapes and sizes that you can think of. Very useful stuff. And then this is the big one. This is styrene sheet. Now, there's a euphemism in the Gumpa circle. This is plot plate to a lot of people. So now, It is somewhat of a pet peeve of mine. Plow plate is Tamiya's brand name of plastic sheet. That's where that comes from. So when you hear somebody say plow plate, they're meaning plastic sheet. This styrene, polystyrene plastic sheet. You can get this anywhere. You
Yep.
got some.
Yep.
And are you starting to carry that
Yep,
online?
I'm gonna just start carrying it. Evergreen, it's evergreen scale models
Cool.
stuff, which you see.
So for those of you guys at home, Zach Bleish, everybody, say hi, Zach.
Hi.
So he's been the one on YouTube talking with us for the past couple weeks. This
Yep.
guy's the man. So thank you for having us, by
Oh
the
yeah,
way.
absolutely.
So yeah, so this comes in a bunch of different thicknesses: 1 millimeter, half millimeter, goes all the way down to 0.5 or 0.3 millimeter. I've even seen some people online use 0.1 millimeter, which I can't even imagine using something that thin right now. But hey, if it works, right? So we're gonna be using this today as well. This is really great when it comes to scratch building and stuff like that. We're not going to be getting into scratch building today because that's pretty advanced. I'm not going to be lying to you. But if you do want to try that, it's not as magical as it seems. It's You can get it, trust me. But this is Simple Details is a good entry level kind of precursor to full on scratch building. This is good for armor plating. This is great for making parachutes scratch built. Long story there, trust me. You guys on the stream, you know what I'm talking about. So yeah, so plastic sheet in unison with the strip, great stuff. And then you have your detail parts, your third party kind of just accessory pieces. Now, these here, whoops, these here are by a company called Kotobukiya. They are a model company as well. Zach's got Hexagear and all sorts of stuff here on the shelf. Frame arms girls, all that. Frame arms girls. I'm not a fan of frame arms girls, to be honest with you. But if you're into that, check it out.
Yeah, we carry all that.
So Kotobukiya is great because they make accessories and things like that, detail parts and all that, in just an enormous array of shapes and sizes and weird stuff, right? So I've got 3 examples of this here today. I've got like a peg wall of like 20, 30 different kinds that I stock up on every year. So you've got vents, you've got just kind of these weird, circular, they're called minus molds in Gunpla terms, and you've got just your round details and stuff like that. And then you've got your kind of weird shapes. These are kind of just panels that you can kind of tack on and stuff like that just to give extra detail. But they come in a bunch of different styles. You can get thrusters and you can get custom hands. You can get weapon sets and all sorts of really, really great stuff from Kotobukiya. They also come from companies like Wave. Wave's been making them for years and years and years, and they were kind of the precursor to the accessory line. But they don't necessarily have the variety of Kotobukiya. Gunpla or Bandai has started making builders parts. I'm sure you guys are familiar with those, right? They've got hands and they've got the little symbols like the Xeon symbol and the Earth Federation symbols and all that sort of stuff. So there's a bunch of variety out there for you to choose from. So go hog wild with them is what I would say, but use them sparingly because you can get like pretty wild with them and it just look bad. So aesthetics, keep that in mind, and we'll be talking about that here in a little bit as well. And then you kind of got kind of an extension to that. You have metal detail parts, metal thrusters, metal little detail like little circular things and of that type of thing. Now, one of my favorite metal things to use is this little guy right here. For those of you guys watching at home, there you go. Yes, that's an inflation needle, right? For inflating like footballs and stuff like that. Now you're probably thinking to yourself, what is he thinking, right? No. So what I do, the body right here makes a wonderful thruster nozzle, right? What I do is take a hammer, pound this needle back through the body, because there's a nice, very fine brass kind of fitting in there. You pound that straight through, and then clip this off, make a corresponding, drill a corresponding hole with wherever you want to pop this sucker. You've got an easy, cheap metal thruster nozzle. I've used them over here on the airdrop as well. On the back, on the jump pack here, under the main thruster nozzles, this is the detail part. So if you guys want to get in and actually see these in work, it's right on there. I've used it on the Hummingbird. Yeah, these things, you can get these. You can get these in a gross for like, which is like 144 for like $10, maybe even cheaper. Just a stupid cheap metal part that is easily customizable and that you can attach to pretty much any model. So good stuff there. And these surprisingly, depending on the brand that you get, come in different shapes. Now, mind you, the fitting and everything, the sizes are usually pretty standard, but just the design of the overall piece can vary a little bit depending on what company you get them from. So keep that in mind too. All right, so let's talk about what we're going to be doing today. So brought these two pieces here. You guys probably recognize this as a Federation shield, right? And then again, equally as recognizable, the Zaku shield, the Zaku shoulder shield. We're going to be using and working on both of these today. Here on this one, you can already see some of the examples of the simple details that we're going to be working on. We're going to be going over just, simple plastic adhesion. We're going to be doing stack details. We're going to be talking about the strapping technique, which is one of my favorites. And we're just going to get into it. We're going to use some half round. We're going to use a bunch of different dimensions of plastic and stuff here today. And overall, we're just going to have some damn fun, right? So let's get the show started. Let's start simple. All right. Let's just start with. We're going to start with this guy right here. Just a simple, very simple, just a strip. And that's it. So the thing with aesthetics that you want to remember, you want to spread it out all over the model. You don't necessarily want to have too much, but you want to have enough to where you're like, wow, that thing is awesome, right? So use it sparingly and in good positioning. So that's going to be very important. So for that, we're going to start with, let's go half millimeter by 1 millimeter strip. Now, another great tool, which is very hard to get nowadays, is called the chopper. And if you guys do watch my live streams or have seen it, are you?
I think I'll be able to get them in.
Dude, Northwest Shortline is such a pain in the ass to work with, from what I heard.
Yeah, so
and
we'll
they're
see.
cool.
I'm
If you
trying,
can,
so.
dude, if you can get them,
Yeah.
they sell.
Yeah.
They sell. Now, one thing that you're going to be seeing me work with today is this little guy. For those of you at home, you've seen this little guy. This is a super tiny hobby knife. This is by NT Cutter, a Japanese company. I think you can only get them on Amazon, so that's why I didn't really say much. Yeah, so this actually is really great for detail work. You can do it with the Olfa knife, hands down. I've done it for years and years and years. But I've just recently become a fan of the little NT Cutter blades and hobby knives. Like I said, they're a little bit harder to get outside of Amazon, but you can. So, so let's talk about strip detail, right? When would you use it? How would you use it? Because that's the things that you're going to have to think about before you lay these things down. You can't just do it haphazardly, because then it's going to look like you've done it haphazardly, right? So we're going to work on the Zaku shield primarily today. So let's start with, we're going to just cut some length here. And thank you for the expendable tables. I was kind of worried about that. I was just like, oh man, but then I saw the cuts and everything. I'm like, oh cool, we can just cut right on here. That's awesome. Good stuff. So I just cut a random length first, right? One that I thought will look good. So measure, don't do as I do as I say type of thing. I'm kind of compressing my technique down for demo purposes, so keep that in mind. So you can use that as a guide and then cut the same exact length, and then you have two identical lengths of this plastic strip. So obviously this is going to be insanely hard for you guys to see, but there she is. Two little lengths of plastic strip, right? Now, what one thing that I really love to do is to use these as kind of reinforcement, as protection for the part. And you're going to see that a lot in kind of the Gundam aesthetic, right? There are some very common traits that you'll see, and you'll notice these as you kind of look more and more. So I'll show you here in just a second what we're going to do. We want to be careful with that. That's a bit too much. I knew I was going to do that. Trying to be quick for the demo, and I just end up messing it up. So what we're going to do is we're going to pop these on here to the two top corners, and that's going to basically add kind of a level of protection, kind of a bumper, if you will, for this for the shield, right? And you'll kind of recognize the aesthetic once it's applied. And I'm just, again, please measure and get these symmetrical when you're doing it. But for demo purposes, I'm just kind of placing them, I'm eyeballing them, so to speak. So keep that in mind. So let's get all right. All right. So there is basically your kind of protection, your bumper, kind of, if you will. Everybody see? So very common aesthetic. Very, very common aesthetic. You're going to see these on different shields. You're going to see these on different armor pieces where they're going to have these added kind of pieces, and Bandai's actually molded these into a bunch of different kits. So this is a very, very common thing to add to your armor pieces to give it that extra protection, that extra feel of realism, right? Because that's essentially what we're trying to accomplish, is we're trying to emulate scale, that illusion of scale. That's what we're trying to achieve. So that's kind of your first foray into just strip application, right? Now, beyond that, you can do strip application for just kind of detail pieces, right? So if you look at this Federation shield, molded into the plastic, and let's get this on camera, molded into the plastic is just a strip, just a raised strip of plastic, right? And you can see that. I've got this white strip here, but you can see it right beside it. That's actually molded into the shield, right? So that comes from Bandai. They designed it that way. So you can do that same thing. You can replicate that, right? Let's see, I've got, this is 0.5 millimeter by 2 millimeter, which works great for that type of thing. And again, measure. I'm not going to, but measure. So, just something kind of moderately long, right? Let's get the super glue off there. That'll work. And let's see. Hold that with the tweezers. And let's get some glue down. From what I understand, Zach, Chris and the guys from Chicago are on their way.
Oh, are they?
Yeah.
All right.
Evidently I got word about that.
Okay.
So I did see that in the chat earlier. Yeah. So 2 millimeter by 1.5 millimeter, and basically just lay that right down the middle. And my placement sucks because I'm trying to hurry, but anyway, you get the idea, right? It's super off center. You don't worry about that. Measure yours, take your time to place it, get it centered, and then that's basically what it'll look like. So since I'm super particular about this, I'm gonna actually rip this off of here, and I'm gonna start again because I can't stand it. The release for that. There we go. Oh no, I already got it. When if you get it within, you know, about a minute or so, it hasn't really completely set up, you can strip it off of here. I use the chisel blade for that. Super easy. Um, Now, if you guys happen to watch my live streams, you know I'm stupid particular about placement and everything. Right now, like I said, for demo purposes, I move quickly. I move very, very quickly. So let's get this placed a little bit better now. There we go. That's a little bit better. Not perfect, but it's better, right? At least it's straight now. It's not off to an angle or anything. So for those of you guys watching at home, there you go. So again, that's starting out as a pretty decent design, right? Starting to look like something that looks pretty decent. That's just the starting point. We're not done yet, right? So those are the types of things that you can use for just simple strips. Now, one of the things that I really, really love to do is get super, super tiny. 0.25 by half millimeter. So very, very thin, very tiny, very fine piece of strip plastic here. There she is. And you guys aren't even going to be able to see that at home. Oh, there you go. We got a little contrast over the shield. Uh, I mean, that's super spindly, right? The reason why I like to use this is to emulate raised latches and everything on an armor piece. If you've ever seen like tanks or planes or stuff like that, they have latches where you can take off the covers and everything, or the armor or what have you. Flying into Grand Rapids on Wednesday, I'm looking out the window. I'm looking and studying the engine of the plane. And you know there are these metal latches. They're embedded into the covers of the engine. Same type of thing with any armor or all of that. If you've ever seen pictures of the 1-to-1 scale Gundam in Japan, in really close-ups, you will see all the latches on all the panels. What that does, if you're thinking about this kind of theoretically and then kind of in universe, you want to be, you know, the mechanics that are working on these mechs that are going to have to repair these things in field have to be able to remove those armor pieces very, very quickly because you know what, you got to turn these things over. You got to get those mechs out there and get them fighting again, right? So with that, we want to try and emulate those latches as best we can. Now there's two types. There's raised and there's embedded. Strip is good for raised, and the chisels are good for the embedded look. That's where your notches come into play. That's what they simulate. They simulate embedded latches to yank that armor piece off of there. So for these, I really like to put these kind of like in the corners of armor pieces or wherever I'm placing them. Or I can actually even use these as little bumper systems as well. Just very, very tiny little pieces, maybe 2 millimeters long at most for something like this. Works wonders. You can also use this as detail as well. I've done that plenty of times before. So we're going to cut a few pieces of this and we're going to pop these on there. And wow, I lose it on the table here. It's crazy. Yeah, yeah, it's like, it's white. I can't see it. But what I would definitely do, use a chopper or use a ruler or something like that. Excuse me. But you do want to keep this pretty small because you're dealing with, you know, a small piece of plastic. You want to keep the length equally as short, right? So right there on the tip of my finger. There you guys. There you go. So that's kind of basically what we're talking about here. Now, so I can keep track of these little guys, I'm gonna put these on the shield here so I don't lose them. A good contrasty cutting mat is going to be great to have, by the way. Darker the better because then you can see the parts easily, especially since they're, you know, this is all like white styrene and everything, so that's going to help out a ton. So with that being said, we're actually going to use the hobby knife to pick these up because the tweezers, these pieces are going to be way too small for that, right? So we're gonna just kind of gently kind of poke these and pick that up with the tweezer. Everybody see that? Or the hobby knife. And we're just gonna try to dip that right there. And now that it's stuck on the bottle, again, we're gonna pluck that off of there. And we're gonna place these right here again, like I said, in the corners and stuff like that is good placement. And again, whoopsie. There again, you want to you're going to simulate raised latches, like I said. So
Tim, for something that's small, non-solvent, because obviously they would just melt otherwise.
you know, I've used solvent based on these, especially when it comes to tricky placement. But yeah, I would. You can go either way.
Okay.
Honestly, it's not going to be a big deal. So there's the top raised latches for this, right? Everybody see? And then everybody at home, there you go. That just adds. I mean, look at that. Just visually now, that's a lot more interesting than just your standard vanilla looking Zaku shield, right? Just this flat, straight, ugly panels. Yeah? This is now visually more appealing. This is going to get you better looks wherever you take your model, right? Whether it be competitions like GBWC, or you know maybe a local competition, or even just showing it off to friends, you know, or online or whatever. You know, people are going to stop and look at something like this. You're going to be like, oh, wow, they did something different. Let me see what they did. That's going to get you more looks. So something like this, simple little things. Anybody can do this. Anybody can glue plastic strip onto a piece and make it look pretty damn cool, right? So things like this, out of this world. So that's step one, right? After that, we're going to get into let's get into some stacked details, right? So stacked details I've used a lot on the Jesta, especially kind of on the feet and things like that. Stacked, what I mean by stacked details, and I'll pass the shield around so you guys can see a little bit better, are, and let's see if you guys can see at home. So like these details here up near the shield, these are stacked, meaning that there are two different lengths of plastic strips stacked onto each other at a staggered, almost like a stair step kind of look. And so when I pass this around, especially look at these two pieces up here, that's what I'm talking about. So go ahead and pass that around. You guys can take a look at that. So what that does is it just adds variety to your you know, your detailing repertoire, so to speak, right? So again, super easy to create, to scratch build, because that's essentially what we're doing right now. So let's go 0.5 by 1 millimeter. Actually, did I have? Yeah, I already have that one. Yeah, I already have that one out. Cool. All right. And again, you can use whatever size of a dimensional strip that you want to use. I always like to work smaller because that sells the scale so much more, right? So with that being said, let's get some strips cut here. This is probably about 4 millimeter for the base. So we get 2 cut there, and then for the stack, we're gonna bring that down to about 2 millimeter, right? There we go. So now you have both both dimensions already cut, good to go. They're all evened up. So first things first, what I would do is to build your stack first. You don't want to apply it, you know, in steps on your model, because then it's just more room for error. Because if you don't get that placement just right, you're gonna have to strip everything back off and start again. So starting with the stacks off the model, always the best way to go, because you're not going to damage the kit, which is super expensive. This stuff, super cheap, just work smarter. You know what I mean? So let me get some of this glue off of here that we got on there before, so I can grab these parts a little bit easier. All right. So super glue to the little stack right there, and then you get your one of your bases here, and you want to try to get that, you know, in whatever position that you want. You don't have to have everything, you know, either right justified, left justified, whatever. You can have this, you know, straight up in the middle, which is actually something I'm going to do right now. Actually, I'm going to offset them a little bit, and I'm going to have more to one side than the other. So that actually makes kind of a brand new look, so to speak. So this is going to be impossible for you guys to see, but you know, on this 4mm base, I've got maybe 2mm, maybe about I don't know, maybe 1.5 millimeters on one side, and then a 0.5 millimeter gap on the other side. It's offset. It makes a completely different look, completely original, right? So now that we've got the stack done up here, now we can get this applied to the actual part, right? There we go. And let's see, we're going to put that right up here on the back. Right there. Ah. Placement, man. Placement is key right now. And I'm moving way too fast. There we go. That's much better. All right. So there we have our stack detail right at the back. It's inset from the outsides a little bit, just because variety, right? So for those of you guys at home, that's there you go. You've got that stack looking good, right? All right. So we make the other one. We get this set up just like that on the other side. There we go. And do the same type of thing. Offset that to match. And then once you got that on there, get a little glue, pop it on there, and place it symmetrically on the other side. Just like that. Now, again, this is going to be super messy looking. I'm going to warn you right now. And I've got glue everywhere right now too. So keep in mind, you want to take your time at home. But, so there, for the camera, there. So there's your top stack detail. Right over there. Everybody? See that? And since it's stacked, it gives it a cool profile this way too. It's just not flat, right? It gives it a nice profile. It gives it definite variety in things. So variety is the spice of life, right? Especially when it comes to modeling. This is going to be a good look for any model. And you don't have to necessarily use it on shields or anything like that, or any components and stuff. I use this type of technique on the Jesta over here on the feet, you know, and like on the ankle guards, stuff like that, just to, you know, kind of give it, again, variety. So stacking works wonders, right? Now, again, you can go with any dimensional size that you want. You can use 0.5 millimeter, you can use 1/4 millimeter, you can use full on 1 millimeter if you want to, right? I've seen some people, especially with perfect grades and the mega sized models and stuff like that, go crazy with, you know, little details like that. So keep in mind, you want to keep this in scale with what you're working on. So if you're working on 144, go small. If you're working on 100, probably go small, but you have some variety to work with. Bigger, go bigger, right? Keep that in mind. That's very, very important. All right. So we're gonna go through kind of some of the techniques, and then we're gonna get back to you guys, and we're gonna have you work, and I'm gonna walk around and kind of help you out with this. So don't worry, we're gonna get to customizing very, very soon. And mind you, if you don't, the model that you got today, if you don't want to customize it, I totally get it. If you don't want to, work on it today, totally fine, totally fine. You can practice on one of these pieces if you want or something like that. But we have that option. All right, so already, man, this is looking much, much better, right? Much better. But we're still not done. There's still a ton of stuff that we can do to this. Let's touch base on some of these third-party kits, some of these Codable Kia detail parts. Because again, you can get crazy with these too, right? Now, you want to be smart with placement of these things. Even though the vents look cool, does it make much sense that a vent's going to be on a shield like this? Probably not, right? So the vent is kind of out as far as the shield goes. Now, these little circular molds and these little trapezoidal plates, definitely we want to use these two, or we can definitely use these two. Again, you don't want to go hog wild on these guys, because you start gluing these on, and it's just going to look like a Codable Kia factory, and people are going to be like, yeah, whatever, it doesn't look great, right? Now, the cool thing that I like to do, again, for variety, is use these in unison with the styrene strip details, right? So, say for instance, you have one of these circular details and it's raised, right? And it's got a dimensional height to it. You can lay down a strip right next to it and extend that detail and make that different from everybody else, and make it look amazing, right? So I'm going to show you real quick on how to do that. We're going to go pretty small with this. We're going to go 2.5 millimeter diameter on these. And let's see, we're going to clip these out here. Now, for those of you watching at home and for everybody here, I'm not going to worry about the nub marks on these, so FYI, don't do as I do as I say. Make sure you clean your parts and everything like that at home when you're actually being very careful and not doing it like a demo like I am. So we'll get these guys out over here, right there. So very, very tiny stuff. And let's get this. Got a ton of super glue right here on these jaws, so we're gonna get that off of there. And now pick those up. Get just a tiny spot of glue on these. Now, for these types of things, you can place these almost anywhere, but make sure it makes kind of logical sense, right? So for these, I'm actually going to place these little guys down in the bottom corners. And that, for me, in terms of what I'm thinking, just kind of makes sense, right? Because these are what I'm envisioning, at least for this particular part. These are going to be basically like locks for this large panel, right? Imagine it, they lay it down, they latch it in at the top here, they pop this down with cranes, obviously, and then these are going to be your main locks for this piece of armor on this thing. So you want these things to look pretty heavy duty, right? Now, for other parts, it's going to be completely different. When it comes to laying down details, and especially with scribing, what I like to say a lot is think about what's under the armor. Place yourself in the mechanic's position, and think about what's under that armor and how a mechanic would need to get to that, whatever is under there, right? So for this, it's pretty much going to be a solid chunk of armor, right? Now, this main part here, is going to take a ton of damage, right? So you're going to get laser beam fire, you're going to get bullet fire, you're going to get maybe some melee combat, you're going to get bumps and stuff like that if you're running into objects or debris or hell, even other mobile suits, right? So this surface is going to get dinged up and going to get banged, and it's going to get damaged beyond belief, right? So they're going to need to replace these things, because you're just not going to toss the baby with the bathwater, because just like in the future when all this happens, and just like now, these things cost money. They want to recycle as much as they can. So they're going to make these panels easily removable and replaceable. So keep that in mind. All right, so we've got these two little circular details installed. Again, looking pretty good. Now we're going to add a little bit of strip to this, and we're going to make this more visually interesting, right? So I'm going to use the 1/2 by 1, and we're just going to cut some small pieces here, maybe 3mm or so. And we're going to get these lined up. There we go. Now we've got two equally length strips here. And again, we're going to pop this little super glue on there. Now, like I said, we're going to pop these right up against these circular details. Again, placement is everything. And there we go. So now you can see how we've extended, we've customized that that look to something that hasn't ever, you never see this, right? So not saying that you've never seen this in the world, but it's a brand new, fresh take on just simply adding that little circular detail, right? So let's get this other part on here. Right there. Right. Cool. All right. So now we've got both extended, right? Looking pretty good. So there you go. That's basically how you can both use these add-on parts, but also kind of customize that look and extend those parts too, right? Now, I've just shown you how to do little circular bits here with some strip and everything, right? You can go crazy with it. You can use like these little hexagonal plates and stuff like that and have strips coming off of that. You can use these vents and stuff and have strips in different shapes coming off of that. Another thing you can do is use these vents, but then use these hexagonal and these trapezoidal shapes and pop these on the side of the vents and just kind of stack and mix and match and go crazy with the look, right? So don't ever be constrained to just using one little detail part and that's it in an area. You can go crazy with it, you know? It's all set to your imagination, right? So that right there, let's check the time, 1:09, cool. We're making good progress. If you guys had noticed this detail right here, and for those of you guys at home, this little guy right here, I've used this the styrene sheet here, the styrene strip. This is big, it's 1mm thick, probably 4 wide, and embedded a little tiny circular detail in there. Just drilled a hole in there, same size, just pop that little guy in there, and that looks like a, you know, like it's bolted on now, right? We're going to show you the strapping detail here in just a excuse me, in just a few minutes. But like you've also seen on the shield, like up here where these little holes are, there was nothing there. It was just like a straight, just void of, you know, undetailed plastic. I went ahead and popped two, you know, properly sized minus molds in there, and it looks great, right? Equally to that, here on the sides, these are what are called cross plates, right? These you can get these in a bunch of different flavors as well. They come in square and rectangular. They come with just one diagonal cross. They come, you know, with you know, full cross like you've seen here. These are great to make it look like it's kind of heavy, like avoid this area, right? So these are awesome to add on as well, and you can mix and match those and everything as as well. Um, Again, strategically placed here in this kind of raised area on the shield, right? For those of you guys at home, what I'm talking about here. Um, so again, mix and match, go crazy with these Kotobukiya parts and Wave and Gunpla Builder parts and stuff like that. Bandai makes different style plates and details and vents and stuff too. You guys carry the Gunpla Builder parts?
Yeah, we do. I don't know if we have a huge variety. We
Okay.
know we have like hands.
You can get them online, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Galactic Toys online if you.
We do carry
if you can.
Kotobukiya stuff too.
Oh, do you?
The, what do they call it? The HWS set.
Oh, cool,
series.
cool. Okay, awesome.
Have you
So
looked
the weapon systems?
The weapon systems.
Oh, those
yeah.
are cool.
Yeah, there's
Those
even
are
I think
awesome.
there's one with a battery that has.
Do you have any
rotates.
right now?
I think so.
Can you grab one for me? So I'd like to show them here real quick. Just kind of the variety of what Kotobukiya makes because they're such an amazing company. So they make these, they make these little runners with these detail parts and stuff like that, but they also make full-on weapon accessories as well. So, swords and shields and guns and knives and all sorts of stuff, all kind of more mech looked and styled and stuff like that. Some really, really cool and interesting stuff. And I think Zach's going to go and grab those for us. But you can use those on your model, customize those, and then you've got this completely unique weapon accessory for your model kit.
These are
Cool.
bigger kits.
Yeah.
That they sell.
Nice.
And then this is a weapon
Oh,
with
yeah,
a
there we
cannon,
go.
and it has a battery.
Oh, Jesus, yeah. Okay, so let's talk about these for just a second. I'm not going to open these up, obviously, but so for those of you guys at home, let me swing this around. You guys can take a look at that first, right? But for those of you guys at home, we're taking a look at this guy. Where's the angle? There she is. This guy right here, this Kotobukiya. This is like a backpack type of system, like that, right? So you guys can see. This is more, they style these more for their frame arms line, but you can use these on Gundam very, very easily. They got these standard 3mm hard points that you can just kind of glue on there. You can get 3mm rod and customize things and kind of tack things on there for yourself too, which is a really cool feature. But this is the type of variety that you can add on to your model to make it look completely different from everybody else's model, right? So think of this, think of tacking this onto a Jesta, right? You got a Jesta flight type at that point, right? So I mean that's just kind of a really cool thought and option for everybody. Now beyond kind of accessories like that, they have these guys like for those of you at home, this big old cannon. I mean, and this thing's gigantic in terms of scale. So big old weapon unit, right? And not all of them come in something this size too. A lot of them come in something, just in a bag. Yeah, yeah, which are great. They're very reasonably priced as well, and just a great add-on unit. But for something like this, something big, because you get a lot in here. You get all these parts in here to mix and match and make a custom weapon and stuff like that. Those of you guys at home, there you see all the parts that you get in this kit.
We actually have a lot better selection online for this type of stuff.
Do you? Okay.
Yeah, as far as weapons and stuff, you search for it.
Yeah, because there's so many. It's hard to carry everything at
Just
once.
a ton,
I'm sure.
yeah.
Yeah. So, like right here, I mean, you can vary the barrel look, with just 3-4 different looks. Easy, right? So again, tack this onto a Jesta. Tack this onto a Jesta. You've got a flight type Jesta with this big, massive cannon coming at you. That's going to make you run for the hills. I don't know about you, but it would for me. So two options there. Again, they make smaller units and stuff like that. Here, this is like Zach was saying, this is like the battery motor unit for a lot of these motorized things.
Yeah, it can rotate.
Yeah.
Gun.
So this thing is cool. It's almost like a Gatling style weapon. The barrel here rotates pretty quickly, like right. But obviously you need the battery to for those of you guys at home that bad boy right there. But you need the battery unit obviously to do that. And it shows the mounting system for this particular unit underneath. You can create like a mobile tripod with the parts in here and everything like that. And also a really kind of cool option to these is when you buy something like this, you don't even need to really build this. You can take parts out of this and use them for detail, right? That's what's called, they're called greeblies, right? Um, and that's what I do quite a lot with other kits. I primarily build in 1/100 scale, master grade scale, but I'll buy 144 style kits just to take parts out and just to use those. It's such a great option because you get these teeny, these small little details that are perfectly suited for work on a 1/100 scale model. They just make so much sense, and it's great. So you have that option as well, right? Um, Using that type of product to build your finished piece is a great option. Great option. So let's get into what are we going to do next? Whew. Let's get into the strapping. Let's get into the strapping. One of my most favorite techniques. Doing I've been using the strapping technique for years at this point. And it's very heavily used on the Jesta. It's very heavily used on, shoot, really all of my models since the Hummingbird at this point. It's just a great look, and it's a great technique. Um, so what we're talking about, guys at home, this technique, I'm sure you guys have seen this style here as well. But it's basically wrapping the plastic around the contour of the piece, right? And around the angles, the different angles. Now, you can use this. You can use this in a lot of different ways, right? Here is your classic strapping look. Just a kind of a thin piece wrapped around the contours and everything. But you don't have to stop there. You can use big pieces of styrene strip or styrene sheet, mount those to one side, wrap that around the other angle, and now you've got basically an added on piece of armor, right? Um, very good look, very clean, and it just makes your model look amazing, right? So let's do that next, shall we? So what I'm gonna do, let's see, we're gonna use the 2 millimeter, so 1/2 millimeter by 2 millimeter, and we're gonna start to wrap that around here. Now I'm gonna cut just a small piece for the short side, right? We're gonna pop this on here. And then we're going to get into some of the tools and techniques for cleaning the plastic up. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to place this on here, but we're going to overhang a bit of it off the piece, right? And that's important. That's super important. And I'll show you why here in a minute. Let me get that placed first. All right. So now while this is setting up, see we've got some overhang here, guys. Yeah, it looks like the stream is not doing very well. I see that. We're in red. So sorry, guys at home. We tried, right? Um, so for those of you here, though, you see how we've overhanged that strip off the part, right? That's very important because what we need to do is we need to cleave that off and make that even with this corresponding surface. So for that, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to trim off most of that here with my nippers, like that, and that takes off the bulk of it. Now, to get that super clean and to get that super even with this corresponding surface, you want to use either your hobby knife or what I like to use is chisel blade. Because what this does is it gives you the opportunity to turn this over so the angled side is down and ride that surface, let the knife ride the surface and just cleave that off of there and even that part up, just like that. So now you've got the strip, which is completely even with this corresponding surface, right? So that's your first step in terms of strapping, yeah? Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and make sure, because you never get everything on the first attempt, I'm going to go back and just make sure that this is super, super even and clean. And when your knife is riding along this surface and it's not getting any more plastic off, that's when you know you're done. Stop. Just stop. Because what's going to happen is you're going to lay it down another piece of plastic over top of that. So any gaps or anything like that, any really minuscule gaps, there's going to be filled with glue. So not to worry. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take another strip, maybe a little bit longer this time. We're going to cut that off of there, and it does, the ends don't have to be super, super clean right now at this point. If you want to have a square end, make sure that's square at this point, but otherwise we can work with this. So what we're going to do with this, though, is I'm going to stylize this a little bit, and I'm going to chamfer the corners. We're going to try to get these as even as possible. That looks pretty good. So what I've done is just basically, and it's hard to see, I know, but we've just clipped off the corners of that square, and that just gives it a much more mechanical, much more technical look. So those of you guys still on the stream, I know it's hard, I know it's buffering. So we're going to glue this down. And let's see, let's get some glue on here. There we go. All right, so now what we want to do, what's going on, man, is we're going to lay this down. This is the key placement, because you want to get this right in line with the underlying strip. And just like that. And then, of course, we still got overhang because we're going to trim that off of there, right? But now you can see the placement is right in line with that underlying strip. That is basically dead on. That's the most important step of this entire process, is getting this overlying strap in line with the underlying strap, right? So we're going to let this glue set up for just a few seconds, and then we're going to do the same thing. We're going to use our nippers and clip off the excess of this. We're going to get most of that off of there. But you don't want to try to get everything off of there at once, because what you can do is you can remove more plastic than what you wanted. Bad thing. That's a very, very bad thing, right? So now that we've got most of this clipped off of here, this overhang, we're going to go back to our hobby knife or our chisel blade. At this point, I like to use the good old hobby knife, simply because it's a little bit more fine. But let me try to get the super glue up of here. There we go. Good. And we're going to kind of make some precision trimming here. Again, what I'm doing is I'm letting the blade ride on top of that strip and use that as a guide, right? So you guys see that back there? So you just kind of make like a just a clean cut, kind of cleaving motion in there. And then that will look, that'll be perfectly even. Now, if you get a little bit of, if you get, just a little bit off and you don't want to necessarily go back with your knife, you're not 100% sure, use a file, and you can go back and kind of file that down, and that will make it perfectly matched. Now, the good thing about super glue is that it's a great filler. I no longer use like Tamiya white putty or anything like that. I no longer use putty fillers anymore, except for epoxy putty, which is best for major voids and reshaping parts. I will use one of these two for filling surface imperfections, filling gaps, things like that. The reason why is because once it cures, it's almost the same density as Bandai plastic, and you can work with it almost the same as plastic too. I've filled in a bunch of pre-molded details on the Jesta, and then gone back and scribed over those. You'd never know the difference because it's just that good to work with. So for things like this, if you're not necessarily sure about tolerances, gaps, variances, stuff like that, use super glue as your adhesive. That will basically backfill any of those voids, and it's just a win-win all the way around. So, all right, let's pass this around so you guys can see, and you guys can do the fingernail test if you want, and check my work there. It's a little off, I'd say, but you kind of get the idea. So there you go. Pass that around for me. So we're gonna go back to the Zaku shield here, and we're gonna do some more things. But I wanted to show the technique before how to apply it, right? So for the Zaku shield, now we kind of step it up a little notch in terms of difficulty, because this angle here, this edge is not it's not just two surfaces. There's a bevel to it, so there's three. Now we have to work in that with that third angle, right? So for those of you guys still watching at home, there's a bevel here on this, right? Kyle Harris still watching on his end. Good, thank you, Kyle. So we need to make now three different parts, three different straps, right? Because we want to perfectly follow the angles of the piece that we're laying the strap down. Now, if you're laying this down on a curved piece or a rounded piece or something like that, make sure those contour into that piece. That's very, very important. But for angles like this, we're going to get a little crazy here. So we're going to cut the first piece here, and let's see what we're going to do. Let's go second part there. All right, and now we're going to glue this guy down. And so the shield that we have here now, right? We've got some major detail down here at the bottom. We've got some, pretty decent details up here at the top. We've got this nice long strip for, just accent here, kind of at the bottom. Now, you could logically put these straps up here to even that out. Don't do it. Don't do that, because having an even look to it will muddle that overall aesthetic, right? Plus, you're taking away the spot for your prime, your number one decal, right? You can put a group insignia or a Xeon decal or something like that right there. But if you have the straps in there, how are you going to put that decal down, right? So avoid evenness. Embrace weighted spatial details, right? Embrace that. Because if you look at the Jesta, there are heavier details on certain parts, and then there are very sparse details on certain areas, right? So if you look at especially on the shoulders, I could have gone hog wild on the front and the back of the shoulders, but I didn't want to, because I wanted to make sure that the unit insignia was on there, and then also the Federation insignia was on the other side. How are you going to do that with all this detail, crapped up on the shoulders and everything? So what I did on the shoulders was just basically laid some plate down just to give it some more visual impact and to raise the height of that look. And then that gave me that plain space there to lay that decal down on the shoulder. So keep that in mind. That's very important when it comes to aesthetics. So let's get this guy laid down here. Let's start this multi-stage strapping technique here. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to actually put this down here toward the bottom, right? Now, since this has some pre-molded gaps here on the side, just these notches and stuff like that, we're going to play off of that, and we're going to place this squarely in the middle of one of those empty spaces, just like that. So about 3/4 of the way down, right? So that's where we're gonna place it. So that gives us more weight down here at the bottom visually, so that when we do place our decal, then it starts to even out. That's what we're kind of looking for aesthetically. So we're going to take our second part here. We're going to do the same thing on the other side because symmetry is good, but it's not the rule. Symmetry is never the rule. Always remember that. Asymmetry can sometimes be absolutely amazing visually. My friend Josh Dara, he is kind of the man when it comes to this because everything he does is somewhat asymmetrical, but everything just ties in together. It looks so good, right? So that's a big thing. So again, we've got some nice overhang here on all these parts, yeah. And now we're going to trim these up here. Okay, so now we've basically taken that down by half, right? And now we're going to do the fine trimming on this angle here. Right there. And again, you want to use your knife and you want to follow the angle of this bevel, right? You just want to make your knife kind of ride that angle, if you will. And now on this side, I went a little aggressive. So we're just going to take the file and just sand that down a little bit. But that's okay, because again, we're going to strap over these and you're never going to notice it. So let's see here. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to recycle my plastic. I'm going to use the cutoffs from the previous step to overlay on these two angles here, these two bevels, right? So recycling is a good thing. Keep it in mind. All right. Good there. Line up again, super important. You want to get this lined up as closely as possible here. Ah. Nope. Glue set up on me. There we go. Sometimes that happens. This glue sets up pretty quickly. And if it sets up before you place it, it's just never going to go down. Never going to happen. All right, so now we think we got it. All right, so as that glue squeezes out, that's going to backfill any gaps and spaces, voids, anything like that that you might have had with the previous piece. And again, there's going to be overhang on both sides now because this is the side that we're going to trim down flush with everything. All right, so there's the second part, right? Second part of this strap. Let's do the same thing on the other side. Okay. Just like that. All right, so those of you at home, that's what we're doing, right? Good stuff. And then there you go. Both sides now, both of those beveled angles are coming down. We're starting to see the strap take place. And for the most part, it's even, you know, height-wise on this shield, which is a good thing. And so next, what we're going to do is we're going to trim these off. And then we'll start to bring over the last part of this strap. And then that's when everything's pretty much going to start to come together. All right, so let's get this trimmed up here. We're going to make this plastic flush with both angles. Just like that.
These are all units of 1, so we carry
All right, and then we do the same thing on the sides, clean that up, and then you can start to see the angle and everything start to come together. All right. So that looks okay. Looks okay. So we're gonna use the file. We're gonna get this nice and flush with everything. Looking good there. Looking good there. All right, so now we've got basically step 2 of this strapping technique. It's starting to form up, right? Everybody at home? Here are the sides and everything, starting to look good. So now we wrap everything around to the front, and that's when this thing is just gonna, you know, basically take off in terms of what the look we're going for. All right, so we're gonna go for a little bit of a longer piece here. We're gonna go maybe, I don't know, that may maybe 7mm or so. Oh.
It's near your caliber.
Is it? Ah, there you go. Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. I never would have noticed it. Never would have found it. Would have been gone. All right. So we're going to do the same thing like we did before. We're going to kind of detail up the ends of this particular strap. We're going to knock off just the little edges, just the little corners here. We're just going to make this look kind of visually interesting and mechanical. That's the biggest thing. And try to get them as even as possible. It's hard right here with this, and as fast as we're going, but you can see how I've knocked off the 2 corners of this. We're going to do the same thing to the other one. Take your time and measure properly and everything too. All right, there we go. All right, cool. So now we place the last piece here, and then you can see the strapping detail really come into bloom, if you will, right? Let's see. There she goes. Nice. All right. Good there. We place the other side here. Make sure when you're placing these down and you're laying these down, they're even on both sides, right? Okay. All right. So there's the first part of the last strap, right? We've got this, you know, nice overhang that we've got to trim off there, but visually, it's pretty decent look, right? Right. For everybody at home, that's our next step there. So now, hopefully, this glue is set up enough so now we can knock off the extra strip here. All right, good there. Let's make some trims here. Now I'm noticing straight off the bat that my placement probably not that great right now. I'll be the first one to admit it. Mainly because I'm going quick here, but you get the idea. Yeah, that placement is terrible. It's really bad. I'm not gonna lie. It's really bad. You'll see it when I pass it around. It's really bad. But you know, the look and the intention is there. All right, we're just going to try our best to even these up with the file here. And at least there's no gap between the parts. Let's put it that way. Let's be happy for that, right? But there, everybody at home, there, everybody here, you can kind of see how this straps around, and that adds just that much more visual appeal to this thing. So, you know, there's already a lot of detail on the backside here. So when you go to paint that, you can paint these inlays like a nice gray color or something like that, nice and dark. Mask those off and then paint everything this kind of weird, you know, minty green. And then that's going to visually pop on the back here. Same thing on the front here as well. You can mask these off or hand paint them, whatever your preference is. You can paint these like a nice dark gray or something like that to pop, and that's just going to make these things just stand out like crazy, right? So look at everything we've done in basically like what, an hour and a half maybe. We got, you know, some really cool little details up on the top here. Nothing crazy, nothing really weird looking. We've got some nice details on front here, strapping, everything there. We used our little third-party parts here. So yeah, we kind of got crazy with it. So last thing I would say, where are they here? Yeah, let's use these, and then I think that'll be it in terms of demo. And then we'll kind of regroup and we can kind of get hands-on. I hope each one of you kind of, you know, work a little bit. So one of my main beefs with this particular runner is that these big ones are way too big. I never use these big ones. I've got like 7 of these on my pegboard. All these little ones are all cut out and used and everything, but these big ones, they're all sitting there. Because I can never come up with a viable way to use these things without them looking just tacked on. I don't know. But anyway, thankfully for us, we've got some small ones on here that I can use. So we're gonna do that here. We're gonna clip these off of here.
All right, so I'll do the 2 arcs first, 4s.
And again, I'm not gonna clean up the nubs, FYI. I know, cardinal sin, right? Yeah, right, exactly. I'm sure the folks at home are like, what? But what are you gonna do? All right, so we're gonna add these to the sides, the edges of the shield. The thing with pieces of armor like this, or shields, or what have you, this surface here and this surface here get all the love, right? These sides, they get no love most of the time from people. They get absolutely no attention. And these sides are what people actually see the most, if you think about it. So if you think about the shield sitting on the Zaku's arm like this, if you're looking at a frontal shot of the Zaku, what are you going to see? You're going to see that edge, right? That edge needs some love. We're going to give some love to that edge. So we've got our little part here. We're going to pop a little drop of glue on this sucker, just like that. And we're going to apply this on the upper side here. We're going to pop that on right above the seam line so that it makes it a little bit easier, you know, for disassembly and all that good stuff. Just like that. And then grab this little guy here. And symmetry is key. Right about there. Now, please measure when you're trying to get symmetry. Don't do this. Don't just eyeball it like I am. This is a very, very bad practice. But for demo purposes, it's not actually that bad. I actually lucked out. Look at that. All right. So there you can see, now this has some visual interest, right? Now it's visually more appealing. So you could, again, base paint this, you know, your weird minty green, and then paint these two. You could paint these yellow or red or something like that to really draw attention to it, to really kind of give some visual impact on the piece, right? Don't be afraid to experiment with colors either. So say for instance these little round parts here, those could be yellow, those could be red, those could be purple for whatever you want to do. But something to contrast, obviously, with your base color would be appropriate. So, for those of you guys sitting at home, there's your side, your little details and everything like that. So, pretty good there. So yeah, so there are pretty much, I mean, just in about an hour and a half, we've got almost a pretty much fully detailed shield, right? Pretty decent. So one more thing before we stop. I know I said that was the last thing, but one more thing I do want to touch on. Sorry. Because I know I said when we were covering tools that we talk about these guys here. Let's just real quick just touch on these because I know these add so much visual impact to something like this. It's not even funny, and it's not going to take long either. So trust me. All right, so little piece of Dymo tape here. Normally I would cut these with scissors, but I forgot mine, so I'm gonna use my nippers. It works. There we go. That works. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna basically get some panel lines on here. But before that, let's see. Here we go. Conceptualization of panel lines is very, very important. So, sandpaper, rough up the surface just a bit. Nothing crazy, just a bit. That way, take your pencil, the lead will actually lay down on the part, right? So let's actually be careful here and let's try to get this straight across there. So there you can see how the pencil lead is laid down real nice. That's basically your guide for your panel line. Now, we're not necessarily going to stop with just this straight line across, or at least I wouldn't want to, but for demo purposes, that's what we're going to do. So, nice big piece of Dymo tape. Getting the backing tape off of this stuff, and I don't know how it is with the roll for MadWorks, it probably just peels off, which is rather nice. But for this stuff, super pain in the butt. You want to try to fit your knife blade under the backing, but above the actual tape, which is always a song and dance. It's a very fine skill to have, let's put it that way. So you've got your tape. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to lay this right across the front here, and I'm going to wrap this around the sides, because even though this is pretty rigid, it can still go around the sides with a bit of finesse. And then you've got a perfectly lined up perfectly lined up line all the way around now, right? So we're going to make a panel line, and then we're going to use our bigger chisels. We're going to make 2 notches, and then that'll be it for this, because this isn't a scribing class. That's another class. So for 1/100.15 millimeter, again, this is BMC. Zach and everybody here, they carry MadWorks, which is a great company too, equal in quality. This is just kind of what I've gotten into, and this is the kind of the environment that I'm bought into at this point. I've got a ton of them. So when it comes to chisels, you've got your flat angle here, and then you've got your angle right here, right? How many people work with wood or have seen woodworking and stuff like that? So this is completely different from wood chisels. Wood chisels you push. We don't do that. We do not do that. If you try to push with these, you're gonna break your chisel like that. Trust me. No, this is actually a pulling action. So what we're doing is we're scraping the surface of the plastic and engraving that line into it. So we want our flat end on the bottom, our angled end on the top, right? So one thing I would say time and time again, let this thing do the work for you. Don't try to go hog wild on your first stroke. It'll not work out, and it'll be a mess, right? Let this thing do the work. So I'm going to start at the top here, Real nice and simple. I'm not hardly applying any pressure. I'm just basically getting that line started, getting that groove started. We're going to make multiple passes on this, and you'll start to see these little pigtail type of pieces of plastic start to stream off of the part. That's a good thing. That's what you want to see. That's when you know that the chisel's doing its job, and you're going to have a nice little panel line there. And also, you want to listen to the plastic. I know it sounds weird. Why would you listen to plastic, right? But if it makes one smooth kind of sound, like zip, that's when you know you've got a nice clean bottom to this panel line. If you hear it skipping or you feel it skipping, then you know it's a little weird. It's not the end of the world, but if you can get a smooth, sound and a smooth motion, that's always going to be better. Because when you go to panel line this and you use like panel lining fluid, it's going to flow through this line so much easier and so much quicker and so much better. Any height differences in the bottom of the panel can cause pooling and can cause raises. It could cause stoppage of that panel lining fluid. You don't want that. You want to avoid that as much as possible. So that's the importance of a nice clean panel line. Yeah, and see, I know it's probably going to be tough for you guys at home. Yeah, you guys can't see that. But there's this nice long little pigtail strip that I just got off of that, and that's the length of this part. That's how you know you've got a nice smooth bottom of that panel line, right? So you want to basically start applying that pressure a little bit, and after a few passes, stop, because then you're going to be good. Then you want to start wrapping that panel line around the piece. You want to start going at the bevels next. And this is only going to take a few passes because it's a super small little angle. And then down the other side. And I'm only going to take this down to the seam line because that's the logical endpoint for this. Because on this particular piece, this seam line is a feature of the actual shield. So that's a logical demarcation or endpoint for that panel line, right? Same thing on the other side. We're going to tie this all together. Whoops, that's the wrong side. Oh well, we're going to have an extra little panel line there. Might not look bad, but still. Alright, and then we're going to wrap this thing around on this last bevel here. Now, since we just made that accident and I scribed on the wrong side of the tape, we can actually use that to our advantage. Happy accidents, right? So I'm actually going to scribe a new line on the other side of the tape here, and I'll tell you why here in just a few seconds, because it will look, I think, visually amazing once you get this thing painted. But we're going to make a brand new panel line all the way around on that other side of the tape that we didn't necessarily mean to. All right, and last part here. You hear that, right? It just zip right across. That's what you're looking for. Yep, there you go. All right, so now, moment of truth. But before that, put your caps back on your chisels. You don't want this thing falling off the table,
Into your
breaking.
leg.
Yeah, this is called chisel discipline, much like firearm discipline. Chisel discipline. Put the cap back on your chisels because these things are expensive and you don't want to waste them. All right. So now that we've got our panel lines scribed all the way around, right? Moment of truth. It's like unwrapping a present at Christmas. Yes. All right. So little sanding just to clean everything up. Good there. And we use our 0.15 again to kind of get the dust out of here, because the dust will settle, obviously, in that panel line before any place else. And here you can kind of now start to fine-tune the depth of your panel lines, because if one looks deeper than the other, you can go back and now do that, since it's basically already cut in. The panel lines are already there. So you can just ride that groove and get the depth correct. All right, so there. Now, what we basically have is we have this big long stripe, around the front. So this is the reason why I said this would be visually more appealing at the end. So imagine, if you will, you've got this thing painted minty green, you've got the details painted in gray and other shades, maybe yellow or red and stuff like that. It's missing a light color, in my opinion. So tape off this middle section here, paint that white, lay your decal over top of that white stripe, and boom, you've just created something so visually awesome at that point. It's just, yeah, it's gonna look so much better than what it did stock. You can put a unit insignia, you can put maybe some gray numbers or something like that on here, a Xeon logo, something like that. Yeah, that I think will look really, really good once it's painted up and once it's finalized. The contrast of colors, the contrast of shapes, the contrast of visual elements like decals and stuff like that, it's all going to add to the visual look of this thing. It's all going to look great. So go ahead and pass that around for me. All right. So, what's that? Chisel discipline. Use it. Chisel discipline. Okay, so that is the last thing that we're actually going to demo. Any questions from you guys? Yes, sir.
When I know that with the panel lining, obviously you want to take a lot of time to think about what you're going to do beforehand.
Yes.
But for the painting stuff,
Right.
How long do you kind of like sketch it out and think it out, or are you kind of laying pieces and thinking about it? What's your process?
That's a great question. Everybody's different. Everybody's different. Some of my friends have this innate ability of drawing and planning everything out. I don't have that ability. I'm more of a fly by the seat of my pants kind of guy. So believe it or not, I actually think of all of the things as I'm doing them. So at that point, it's a toss-up in terms of what your preference is. If you have that ability, or if you have that desire to pre-plan, then absolutely do that. If that works to your workflow, then I would do that. Sketch out the different parts and stuff like that, or even on the part, sand it up, draw on it with pencil, because you can erase that, right? But for me, for my process and for my workflow, what you see is what you get. I'm like, oh, hey, let's do this, or hey, that would look cool. Let's try this, right? And for those of you that watch the stream, Andrew can contest to this. Sometimes I will look at things after I've done them and absolutely hate them. The current project that I'm working on now, which just so happens to be a Zaku shield, I laid down this really thick 1mm plastic strip on there, and it looked like picket fences, right? Yeah. It was so bad looking after I did it, but initially I was really happy with it. So then, a couple weeks go by and I'm like, man, this looks like shit. I'm just, you know what? So, and I glued it down with plastic magic, and you saw that stuff holds like crazy. So I had to go in and just kind of chisel that stuff off of there and rip it off. And then go back and fill in those voids and those nasty surface with super glue and stuff like that. So that's part of my process, something that I'm comfortable with, and it's something that I've kind of evolved over time. But yeah, it really is whatever is best for your process. So that's what I would say. But great question. Great question. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
When it comes to the scribing, curves. Just because
the dreaded curves.
always
Yeah.
just straight lines.
Yeah. Curves. Let's talk about that. Let's for those of you guys at home, let's go one camera here. hopping back and forth, but what else is new, right? So your notches. What I like to use is 0.30, 0.50 for your notches. You vary the width. Sometimes I'll use a full-on 1 millimeter, but nothing over that for notches. Anything above 1 millimeter, it's for removing material and for basically sculpting plastics. Everything below 1 millimeter, that's kind of your detail work and stuff. So, excuse me, for notches, remember how I said when we were talking about panel lining, you want to pull, you don't want to push? Forget that for notches. This is going to be your more traditional chiseling technique. Now, you can do both, I'll be honest. You can pull or you can push. If you're pushing, be very careful with the tip of your chisel because you will knock off an edge like nothing. Pulling a notch takes a little bit more time though, because you have to work through, you know, minusculely that material, right? But let's take a look here real quick and let's go through that. Where'd my little ruler go? Oh, there it is. All right. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna use our little T-square, and I'm actually going to use this piece of plastic here because I know when I cut it, this is a right angle, right? So we're gonna use this as our guide, right? Now, recessed notches are just that. They're notches recessed into the armor. And all we're basically trying to do is get a shape, get a negative shape so that when our panel lining fluid flows into it, it gives a shadow. There's nothing more that you can do with it because it just won't look realistic at that point. So what we're going to do is we're going to use our 0.3. I'm going to start to pull this shape. Now, I know the question was more about how to get the nice square ends, and I'm gonna show you how to do that because that's where the technique comes into play. But you want to get your grooves started first, you know, get your groove on, and then once you've got that, which we have now, then you can go back and really kind of finalize that shape, right? So I've got a little bit of an indentation already in there, so I can work with that. So I'll start at the top end and just pull down. And you want to try to start your chisel in the same exact place every single time. That's what's going to give you really nice and square lines, right? Now, one thing that I didn't mention before is you've got to be aware of a phenomena called ramping. And it's just kind of a term I coined just to describe this because what's going to happen is even with you know, scribing a panel line, you're going to get a buildup of plastic material at some point in that line. And what that's going to do is it's going to build up. And the more you remove material, the more it's going to build up and build up and build up. And it's going to basically become the shape of a ramp, right? Now, the phenomena that you're going to run into is once that's built up enough and it's become solid enough, that chisel is going to ride that ramp and it's going to come out of that groove and it's going to mar the surface of your plastic, right? So you want to try to avoid that at all costs. So I've got, you know, some material built up already. You guys can't see it at home, but you know what I'm talking about. Already built up there, so we need to remove that so I don't get that ramping phenomena, right? So we're just going to try and clear that out with the side of our chisel, and that works perfectly. And then we just go back to it and just try to deepen this this notch as best as we can. Now, if you guys have like magnifying glasses or like optivisors or something like that, this would be the perfect time to be using them. I use them all the time, but I couldn't bring them just because they're too bulky and I couldn't carry them on or anything like that. And I wasn't really comfortable with packing them either because I know they'll be broken. But this is when I would be using those because this is detail. This is pretty fine work right here. And it's not necessarily square, or I mean straight. It's square. The ends are square, but it's not straight at any point. But you kind of get the idea. And then I'll pass this around so you guys can see this, because you can't see it if I just hold it up. But that's kind of a notch, right? So there you go. So to get your notches square, make sure when you start that groove, or when you're finishing it off,
Yeah.
start your chisel point at that square end
Okay.
and pull this way,
Okay.
right? Because that's going to be the main thing. That's what's going to make it square. So,
Makes sense.
what the? Huh? Look at that. Bunch of different subscribers and stuff. Thank you guys. Anyway. Nice. All right. Any other questions? Anything? Even not about what we covered today. Anything? You good? Paneling. Great question. You guys carry the Tamiya, right?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah. So what I do is I use lacquer-based paints, but it's the same kind of process for really any kind of paints. So you put down your base coat, you put down your secondary colors, clear coat gloss after that. And then that's when I would do panel lining. I use Tamiya panel lining fluid, which is an enamel-based, panel lining fluid. And what happens is that once you have that gloss down, that stuff will capillary action and flow through that panel line. And it's really kind of a pretty satisfying thing. It's like one of those videos you see online, satisfying things, But that's kind of the perfect method that I've kind of evolved over the years. Now, if you paint an acrylic, it's the same type of thing. Lay down your primer, lay down your base coat, your secondary colors and things like that. Gloss clear at that point, and you can use the Tamiya as well, because you want to have a different material set for your paint and for your panel lining fluid, because you don't want those two to interact adversely. So say for instance I'm using a lacquer-based paint, primer, and clear coat. If I was to lay down, say, an acrylic based panel lining fluid, when I went back to start to clear that up, it would strip off the lacquer based, because to clean up acrylic you use alcohol. Alcohol takes lacquer off like crazy. So you want to have opposite materials for your clear coat and everything. Yes. Yeah. Right. Okay. What do you use? Okay. Do you know what kind of base that is? Enamel or acrylic or anything?
It's acrylic.
Is it acrylic? Okay. Okay. So you're going to have a little bit of a tougher time with that, because clear coats, if you're not using an enamel-based clear coat, which I wouldn't necessarily recommend because it's going to take days to really cure. What you want to do is, I would probably change the panel lining fluid that you use. Try the Tamiya stuff because it is really good. It's very thin. And since it's a different material altogether, you're not going to have adverse reactions to it. So, but yeah, to clean it up, you can either let it dry on the part, or you can clean it right away. I actually use makeup sponges, because a lot of people use Q-tips or cotton swabs in other countries. That leaves lint down and everything, and you want to avoid that. The makeup sponges don't do that. They don't leave any other debris down. Yeah, here you go. So yeah, panel line color. They come in a bunch of different colors. Oh yes, this is my
Super clear.
my love. Yes. This is the stuff that I use. It's lacquer based. It's Mr. Super Clear. Yes. Well, for the gloss coat and for top coat. This is gloss. This is what I use
Prior to
thank you. Before the panel lining fluid and for decals.
Then you do another coat over there.
Yes, and then I do a secondary coat over top to finish it off with a matte at that point. So
We have that too.
yeah. I saw you got them all.
Yeah, we got all the varieties.
Yeah, that's good stuff. But this actually comes in. Sorry. Yeah. Yep. Because like this has a coat of gloss underneath of it for the panel lines, for the decals. The decals lay down better on gloss. And then, you know, I did my weathering and everything like that with the Tamiya pastel little. It
The
looked like
master
they look
kits.
like, yeah, the master
Yeah,
weathering
they call them
kits.
master weathering.
Yeah,
kits,
something like that.
They look like little makeup.
Yeah,
things.
exactly.
So,
They're like little makeup palettes,
3
right?
colors per, and then it
Yeah.
comes with a little brush.
Yeah, it comes with a little sponge brush. I would buy more after that as well because they're gonna get messed up. But the cool thing about this, it comes in different colors: light gray, dark gray. This is just gray, black, brown, dark brown. Hell, I think they're coming out with more more colors too.
Yeah, there is. There's like 4 new colors coming out.
Yeah.
It's just like variations of the brown. I think it's
Yeah.
either like light brown.
Right.
Yeah, it's like dark and light.
Yep. And then
Just-
Mr. Color has their panel lining fluid, which is kind of the same thing, and they've got stupid weird colors like pink and purple and white and all that. So you can get really crazy with your color selection. But yeah, lay down gloss, put this down. You can either clean it up right away with a makeup sponge or let it dry. I personally let it dry, and then the most important step, your cleaning fluid. Don't use enamel thinner. You're asking for trouble at that point. Use lighter fluid, Zippo lighter fluid. You can get it super cheap at places like Home Depot and other places like that. That stuff evaporates like that, but it'll take off the enamel super great. So yeah, that is, trust me, I've tried and tested that method over years and years and years, and it's never failed me. The one thing you have to be careful with this, don't let it pool in certain areas, especially on your joints and stuff like that, or your parts under pressure, because if it pools, the enamel thinner in this will make that plastic very brittle. So make sure your gloss coat is solid. Yeah, but this is the stuff. So great question. Anybody else?
The green dye.
No? Really? Oh, okay. All right. Cool. Yeah.
Painting and assembly.
Yeah.
I know that like masks is a big part of that.
Yeah.
Something I always struggle. I don't paint my kids.
Okay.